They saw the human warship 6 minutes before it opened fire. Admiral Carrix of the Yularan Empire stood motionless on the bridge of his flagship, trying to understand what he was seeing. The thing was massive, impossibly massive, and its shape was wrong. No flowing curves, no delicate energy shields glowing in a spectrum of elegance. It was black steel, raw and brutal. No ornament, no pretension. Just a long, armored spine of rage slowly crawling through the stars. What kind of species builds a ship like that? Carrix muttered. No one answered. Their scanners had no data on it. Nothing in their databases. Not even a match to the long-extinct primitives of Earth. Humanity had been dealt with 2 generations ago. Useless, violent, unpredictable. Their homeworld bombarded, their colonies erased. Their species officially marked as culturally unstable, the polite term for a purge. So why was there a warship with a human heat signature? And why was it heading straight for them without broadcasting a damn word? "Send a hail!" Carrix snapped. The comms officer's tentacles twitched nervously. No response. I've cycled through every frequency. It's not replying. It's not slowing down either, the navigation officer added. Carrix clenched his jaw. He could feel it. That primal wrongness. The kind of dread the Yularan Empire hadn't felt in a century. Something older than fear. Something only prey knew. "Raise shields," he ordered, voice sharp now. "Alert the fleet." Too late. The warship's weapons came online all at once. Dozens of energy readings spiked across its hull, but they weren't plasma. They weren't ion-based. They were kinetic. "Is that mass drivers?" one of the junior tacticians said, eyes wide. "Primitive," someone muttered. But no one laughed. A heartbeat later, the first round hit. It tore through Carrix's left flanker like a god spear through wet paper. The ship didn't explode. It disintegrated. Hull plating, crew, power core, all atomized in a flash of superheated vacuum. Then another shot. And another. The human ship didn't pause. It didn't announce. It didn't hesitate. It just killed. Carrix watched, stunned, as ship after ship in his fleet crumpled like they'd been made of cardboard. Dozens in seconds. His voice came back to him too late. "Evasive maneuvers! Fire back! Anything!" A flurry of return fire danced toward the black behemoth, but none of it seemed to matter. Some bounced off thick armor plating. Some hit decoy hulls. Most were simply ignored. And all the while, the warship advanced. Inside that monstrous hull, Captain Dane Strathmore didn't blink. He stood at the front viewport, arms crossed, watching the carnage unfold like it was a routine checkup. His eyes, hollow and sunken from years without rest, tracked each kill like clockwork. "Enemy resistance, minimal," his AI said in a voice cold and clipped. Yularan fleet has suffered 63% losses in 41 seconds. "Not enough," Dane muttered. "They're hailing now," the AI noted. Dane didn't respond. "Commander, they are asking for terms of surrender." He smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I remember when Earth asked for that," he said, voice low, "and they burned us anyway." He let the silence sit. "Bring us in closer," he finally ordered. "No more long-range shots. I want them to see who we are." "Yes, Commander." The warship surged forward, cutting through the debris of fallen ships like a predator through a school of fish. The remaining Yularan vessels scattered, tried to run, but it was pointless. The ship didn't just pursue. It hunted. On the Yularan bridge, Admiral Carrix was shaking now. He wasn't built for this. None of them were. They were conquerors, diplomats, empire builders, not survivors, not warriors. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered. "They're extinct. Humanity is extinct. A deep, human voice suddenly echoed through their speakers, rough and guttural. You should have made sure. That was the only warning before the final barrage. And this time they didn't shoot to disable. They shot to remember. The last of the Yularan ships tried to flee, engines flaring white-hot as they twisted through space, but the human warship, Vengeance, moved like a ghost. No sound, no hesitation, no mercy. It carved through space like it owned the void. Inside the wreckage of Carrick's flagship, what remained of the Yularan admiral clung to life in a sealed emergency pod, half-conscious, barely breathing. His last view before the power flickered out was that ship. Its name burned across the hull in sharp white letters. Letters he couldn't read, but feared all the same. The same name being spoken in terrified whispers across what was left of the Yularan fleet. Vengeance. Back aboard the ship, Captain Dane Strathmore leaned against the console, watching the last Yularan escape vessel spiral into darkness. He didn't chase it. Not this one. Not yet. He let them go, just one, to run back to the others and carry the message. Humanity isn't extinct. It's just angry. Status report, he said quietly. His AI, codenamed Argus, replied instantly, its voice stripped of emotion. 97 confirmed kills, 1 vessel deliberately spared, hull integrity at 98.4%, no human casualties, ammunition reserves 43%. Dane nodded. They didn't even scratch the paint. They tried, Argus replied, almost mockingly, but their weapons aren't designed for war. They're built for suppression. And that's why they'll lose. Dane stepped away from the console. His boots echoed down the steel corridor as he headed toward the observation deck, not because he needed to see more wreckage, but because it was the only place he could be alone with what was left of his thoughts. He pressed a button, and the thick metal shutters slid open, revealing the carnage outside. Glowing wreckage drifted silently in the void. Bodies, too, though distant. Twisted fragments of a race that once believed it ruled everything. They'd called Earth a feral backwater and still burned it to the ground. He remembered it all. He remembered what they did to his wife. They didn't just kill her. They studied her, dismantled her piece by piece in some sterile alien lab. A biological curiosity, they called her. Blonde hair, green eyes, perfect specimen of genetic randomness. They took her while he was stationed off-planet. By the time he returned, there was no body, just a cold report, and an apology from a committee that didn't exist on paper. Earth's leaders had begged for diplomacy. Humanity bent the knee, played the long game. But it wasn't enough. The Yularans didn't want allies. They wanted obedience. And when Earth finally refused to sterilize its own culture, its history, its violence, its stubborn pride, the Yularan fleets came. They burned cities from orbit. They flooded mines with propaganda. They erased monuments, outlawed Earth's languages, and silenced resistance. And when they were done, they declared humanity extinct. Except for a few ghosts. Like him. Back in the Armory Bay, a group of human soldiers stood in silent formation. These weren't raw recruits. They were survivors, hard-faced, scarred, built from years of blood and fire. Each one of them had seen their home fall, watched loved ones vanish into camps, or fought in secret wars beneath alien skies. Among them stood Lieutenant Ramos, Dane's second-in-command, a man of few words, but with a stare sharp enough to cut steel. They didn't stand a chance, Ramos said as Dane entered. They weren't supposed to, Dane replied. Ramos nodded. They'll send more. I hope they do. There was a long silence. Then Ramos added, Some of the crew are asking if we're heading home next, back to Sol. Dane's jaw tightened. What's left of it? They say the cities are being rebuilt, slowly. Underground settlements, old rebel networks. I don't care about settlements, Dane said coldly. I care about the bastards who gave the order, the ones who pushed the button, the ones who watched from their gilded space stations while Earth burned. You think they're still alive? Oh, they're alive. Cowards always survive, and when we find them, we won't offer terms. 3 days later, the Vengeance jumped into a quiet stretch of space just outside the Yularan sector, known as Velantris, a central hub for their cultural elite, built on luxury and delusion. Planet-sized palaces floated here, opera houses the size of moons, libraries filled with propaganda, stories of the great Yularan cleansing of Earth. Dane watched the scans quietly. There's no military here, Argus said. Only dignitaries and archive officials. Minimal orbital defenses. They'll call reinforcements once they see us. Of course. Good, let them. As Vengeance drifted into orbit, a dozen satellites blinked awake, locking onto the intruder. Defense drones scrambled from hangars, sleek and fast. But they were toys. Dane didn't even flinch. Fire a single rail round through their central archive. 1 moment, Argus complied. A low hum rippled through the ship's spine. Firing. The round didn't explode. It didn't need to. It punched through the orbital archive, a 1,000-year-old spire of knowledge and culture, and exited the other side before the structure even understood it was dying. The explosion came after, a slow collapse of burning pages and broken pride. Velantris began screaming over the comms, pleading, bargaining. Some claimed to be historians. Others wept about preservation and peace. One woman, her voice shrill and terrified, begged in the Yularan high dialect, "Why are you doing this? What have we done now?" Dane keyed the mic. "You wrote your victory over my people in stone," he said. "I'm just erasing it." And he cut the channel. Hours passed. Then finally the Empire reacted. Ships began warping in. Small ones at first. Scouts and patrols. Then destroyers. Frigates. One by one they lined up in orbit, trying to surround the Vengeance like wolves circling a bear. But Dane didn't run. He waited. Ramos stood beside him, arms folded. "They're hesitating," he said. "Good. That means they remember." Another comm hail came through. This one from a Yularan general, older, gravel-voiced, tired. "Human vessel," he began, carefully formal. "We did not expect you. We did not believe your kind still existed." Dane replied with one word. "Mistake." "You've made your point," the general said slowly. "You've won a battle, maybe 2. But we are thousands of systems strong. What do you want? Revenge? Territory? Tribute?" Dane's lips curled. "I want the ones who gave the order," he said. "The ones who signed off on Earth's purge. The admirals, the diplomats, the scientists who played God. I want their names, their locations. I want them on their knees." The comm line was silent for a long time. Then, "That was generations ago. Many are dead." "Then dig up their graves and apologize." "You ask for the impossible." Dane leaned closer to the mic. His voice dropped to a growl. "Then I'll keep burning your empire one memory at a time until there's nothing left of your name but ash in a forgotten star." There was a pause. Then the general asked something no one expected. "Would you accept a negotiation?" Dane blinked. Even Ramos raised an eyebrow. "Run that back," Dane said. The general's voice cracked. "We'll open a corridor, meet with a delegation, unarmed. We didn't know there were survivors. We thought Earth was cleansed." Dane turned away from the mic, exhaling slowly, his fists clenched. Not because he wanted peace, but because this wasn't the response he expected. Cowards. All of them. Now that someone was finally hitting back, they were pretending to care. He turned to Argus. Scan their fleet. If they're hiding weapon arrays or cloaked warheads, prep a full salvo. Yes, Commander. Ramos frowned. You really think they're ready to talk? No, Dane said. I think they want to stall, or get a lucky shot in while we're distracted. You going to meet them anyway? Dane nodded. Ramos hesitated. Why? Dane stared out at the gathered enemy. His eyes, bloodshot and burned with the memories of fire, didn't blink. Because it's not enough to kill them, he said. They need to see us first, to remember us. I want to look them in the eyes before we drag them into the hell they built for us. An hour later, a smaller vessel detached from Vengeance's flank. It was old tech, human-made, clunky, full of weld scars and ugly edges. Dane piloted it himself, with Ramos at his side. No escort, no bluff. Just two men full of hate and a silent AI running scans. They docked with the Yularan diplomatic cruiser, and for a moment, silence ruled the airlock. Then it hissed open. Inside stood a delegation. 3 tall, pale blue Yularans with long robes and downcast eyes. One older female in the center had ceremonial rings along her tendrils, marking her as a historian. She bowed, awkwardly, like a child trying to copy an adult they didn't understand. Dane didn't bow back. I am Scholar Marin of the Central Historical Preservation Trust, she began. We acknowledge the crimes committed against your people. Dane took a slow step forward. Do you? She flinched. He looked at the others. Where are the names? The signatures? The ones who called us feral primates and laughed while we burned? Marin hesitated, then pulled a data crystal from her robe. These are declassified records. Names, ranks, programs. I've marked those still living. Dane took it. If this is bait, I'll gut your entire planet. It's not, she whispered. We didn't expect you. We thought your kind had faded. Dane looked her dead in the eyes. His voice turned cold as a frozen blade. You erased Earth from your maps, he said. But you forgot something. Marin swallowed. What? He leaned in close, so only she could hear it. You can't erase hate. The data crystal was heavier than it should have been, not physically, but with weight that settled into Dane's palm like a slow curse. Inside it were names, locations, ranks, a ledger of betrayal, a list of the architects of humanity's extermination. As he walked back through the airlock into the shuttle, silence wrapped around him like armor. Ramos didn't speak. He just watched, waited, knew what Dane was feeling, because he'd felt it too, years ago when he held a photo of his brother, just a charred outline in the ruins of New Santiago. Back aboard the Vengeance, the crew stood still as their captain stepped onto the deck. They didn't cheer. There were no salutes, just nods. Quiet ones, the kind that said, "We're still in this together." Dane handed the data crystal to Argus. Verify everything. Already underway, the AI replied, cross-referencing with recovered human intelligence files, pre-purge EarthNet caches, and survivor testimonies. How many are still alive? A brief pause. 14 of the 39 key signatures remain in active status. 5 are located in high-orbit sanctuaries, 3 on fortified moons, 2 are missing. 4 live on a planet named Virex 9, unarmed, unprotected, civilian classification. Dane turned slowly. Repeat that? Virex 9, Argus confirmed. A retirement colony. It appears they believed themselves safe, untouchable. Their records list them as advisors emeritus. Ramos's face darkened. Those bastards went into hiding on a beach planet while we buried billions. Dane didn't speak. He didn't have to. A silent agreement passed between them. Justice wasn't blind. Not anymore. It was coming in full view, and it wore a human face. 12 hours later, Vengeance dropped out of warp near Virex 9. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful. Blue oceans, green continents, golden sunrises rolling across a gentle sky. Birds still flew here. Wind still carried warmth. It was the kind of place you'd want to grow old on, if you didn't have blood on your hands. Argus spoke as the ship entered high orbit. No planetary defenses, no military presence, standard civilian biosigns, moderate local infrastructure. I've pinpointed the exact estate coordinates for the 4 primary targets. Names, Dane said. Vexiar Thal, High Advisor, authored the final declaration deeming humanity non-viable. Dr. Ralvan Sear, Chief of Anthropobiological Ethics, personally oversaw Earth's experimental filtration. Emissary Juvek Kor, spearheaded interspecies communication blockade. Counselor at Valen, approved orbital bombardment for 3 major Earth cities, including New London. Dane's fingers curled into fists. New London? Ramos growled low. They're all sitting down there, sipping whatever passes for wine in their culture, laughing. Dane's voice was calm. Too calm. Prep the strike team. We go in clean. No orbitals, no scorched earth. We walk in, we drag them out, we make them confess. To who? Ramos asked. Dane looked at him like he already knew. To the dead. The insertion team hit the ground in silence. No fanfare, no alarms. They wore exo-armor dark as the void, matte-plated, reinforced with neural-linked sensors and internal shock buffering. Human design, ugly, rugged, unbreakable. 4 units. Each man had lost everything. Families, homes, identity. All that remained was the mission. They breached the first compound under moonlight. Vexiar Thal's estate was a palace by any definition. Towering spires, synthetic waterfalls, domed ceilings glittering with fake starlight. A bubble of wealth carved from the blood of 10 billion souls. The guards weren't soldiers, just hired security, confused and panicked. 2 dropped their weapons the moment the humans appeared. The 3rd tried to run. Dane didn't shoot him. He didn't have to. Argus locked the man's suit remotely and slammed him to the ground with a violent jolt. The man screamed, then passed out. They moved fast, efficient. No wasted movement. Rooms cleared, walls breached, sensors disabled. Then they found Thal. The bastard was asleep. Lying on silk sheets, 3 female attendants curled near him, soft music playing from a ceiling speaker. His breathing was calm. Dreaming, probably. Dane stood over him, then grabbed a pitcher of cold liquid from the bedside and dumped it straight onto his face. Thal jolted upright, gasping, eyes wild, until he saw Dane's face and stopped breathing altogether. What? He choked. Well, who are you? Dane stepped closer, lifted his helmet. I'm what you forgot, he said. Recognition hit Thal like a gunshot. You human? No, Dane whispered. I'm Justice. They dragged Thal out into the courtyard and dropped him to his knees. The other teams arrived soon after, each with one of the other targets. Ralvan Sear cried the entire time. Kor tried to talk his way out of it, offered coordinates, bribes, alliances. Valen just stared at the ground, silent, resigned. Dane walked down the line, helmet under his arm, eyes locked on each of them in turn. You were the architects, he said. You wrote our extinction like it was a scientific paper, like it was policy. Kor spoke up, desperate. I was misinformed. We believed the data. Your species, your people were too human, Dane cut in. Too violent, too primitive. Isn't that what you called us? No one answered. You didn't expect us to survive? Dane said. You thought we'd disappear, that we'd forget. But that's the thing about humans. He knelt down to look Thol in the eyes. We remember everything. They set up the camera feed 2 hours later. Not for vanity, not for show, but for broadcast. Argus linked into the remaining Yularan communications networks, bypassing security like tissue paper. The message was simple. A reckoning is at hand. Then the feed went live. Millions of Yularans across the stars tuned in, some curious, some horrified, some thinking it was a hoax. They saw their own leaders, bloodied, bruised, humbled, kneeling before a human war hero. And they heard the confessions, one by one, forced out of trembling mouths, every order, every justification, every cold calculation that led to Earth's suffering. And then, finally, they saw judgment. Dane stood tall before the camera, face shadowed by firelight. You called us broken, savage, feral. You tried to erase us. He stepped closer. We adapted. A long pause. And now you will too. He raised his weapon, and the broadcast cut to black. That night, aboard the Vengeance, Dane sat alone in his quarters. A bottle of old Earth whiskey, the last of it, sat untouched beside him. Outside his viewport, Virex 9 turned slowly below, silent and bruised. Ramos entered without knocking. They've gone quiet, he said. The Yularans? Ramos nodded. No fleet movement. No retaliation. They're stunned. Good. You think they'll stay that way? No. Dane finally poured a drink, took a long pull. Let the burn remind him he was still breathing. They'll regroup, he said. They'll paint us as terrorists, say we broke the rules, turn the narrative. Ramos sat across from him. Let them. Dane smiled, bitter and tired. They were never afraid of our weapons. They were afraid of what we'd become when we had nothing left to lose. And now? Dane looked at the data crystal again, now filled with blood-stained truth. Now they'll learn what fear really feels like. A week passed. Not a single shot was fired. But in every Yularan-controlled system, tension sat like a noose around every diplomat's neck. Vengeance hadn't moved since the broadcast. It simply hovered above Virex 9 like a tombstone, casting its long, jagged shadow across a planet that no longer felt untouchable. Inside the ship, however, something else was growing. Not fear, not regret. Division. The kind that always comes after revenge tastes too sweet, and the hunger doesn't die. Captain Dane Strathmore sat in the command chair, reading encrypted relays from human holdouts scattered across the spiral arms. Pings from sleeper colonies. Messages full of disbelief and fury. The broadcast had gone deeper than the Yularans realized. It had reached human ears, too. Ears that hadn't heard a voice like Dane's in over 2 decades. Some called him a hero. Others, a monster. Captain, Argus said, interrupting the silence. There's been a disturbance in Sector 12 of Deck C. Dane glanced up, eyes narrowing. Define disturbance. Lieutenant Hare pushed Sergeant Van into a bulkhead during a disagreement. Van is conscious, ribs fractured, no weapons drawn, yet. Dane stood. Lock them both in the cargo bay. I'll handle it. 10 minutes later, Dane stood in front of the 2 men, both sitting on crates, bloody and bruised, eyes locked in a silent, heated hatred. Around them, the room was filled with crates of salvaged Earth tech, rusted, dented, but still valuable to those who remembered what humanity once was. I give you weapons, Dane said slowly, and you use them on each other? Hare stood first. He said we went too far on Virex. Van groaned, wincing. We did. You didn't see the look on that old one's face, at Valen. He didn't even fight back, he just accepted it, like he knew he deserved it. Dane's stare cut through both of them. So? Van looked up. So maybe it should have ended there. We made our point. The galaxy saw it. They heard their names. Confessions. What more do we need? Hire snapped. We need them to pay. Not just the ones on Virex. All of them. Every bastard who wore a badge while Earth burned. They're not all guilty. Dane raised a hand. Silence. He looked at Van. You want peace now? After everything? I want meaning, Van said quietly. We've turned ourselves into the same thing they were. If this doesn't stop, we're not justice. We're just cleaner murderers. Dane stepped closer. You think I do this because I like it? Van didn't answer. Dane's voice lowered. You weren't there when they melted her body into nutrient slurry. You didn't have to read a post-mortem autopsy labeled cultural sample. You didn't get a death certificate that had more Yularan words than English. I know what we lost, sir. I lost too. No, Dane said coldly. You survived. That's not the same thing. He turned away. She's a human, Dane snarled. That makes her mine. He turned and spotted her again. The woman in the cell. Still bound, barely conscious, but her eyes met his. She was terrified. Not of the enemy, but of him. She warned us, Dane muttered. She tried. 3 Spec Ops soldiers advanced, weapons raised. Dane didn't wait. He dropped low, rolled behind a shattered pillar, pulled his rail pistol, and fired 3 precise rounds. One Yularan's helmet cracked and imploded, the other 2 scattered. Dane used the distraction to sprint to the woman's side, slamming his shoulder into the lock console. Sparks flew, the restraints loosened. He caught her before she fell. You're not dying in a cell, he growled, hoisting her over his shoulder. Not like the rest of us. More gunfire echoed behind him. He ran. Elsewhere in the base, Ramos and 2 other team members had regrouped behind a blast door, pinned down by turret fire. Where the hell did these bastards come from? One soldier shouted. They were waiting for us, Ramos said. They knew we'd come here. This wasn't just bait. It's punishment. For what? For the broadcast. Ramos activated his comm. Dane, respond. Are you alive? A hiss of static. Then, still breathing. Got the survivor. Need evac. Now? Copy. Trying to reach the hangar, but they've locked external controls. Then unlock them. Argus is being jammed. We're flying blind. Ramos made a snap decision. We go manual. Inside the base's central control room, the lights flickered violently. Argus was fighting back, corrupting security protocols, crashing command terminals, and opening doors at random to buy time. But the jamming field was strong. Too strong. I can't access full ship functions, Argus reported grimly, but I've overridden their surveillance network. You have 30 seconds of blackout. Use it. Dane didn't waste a heartbeat. He moved through the maintenance tunnels, dragging the woman behind him. Every step was a blur of pain. His armor was scorched, breathing ragged, but his grip never faltered. You got a name? He asked her. She blinked, coughed once. Tess. All right, Tess. You stay awake, or I throw you over my shoulder like deadweight. Got it? She nodded, weakly. Dane shouldered open a hatch and stepped into a secondary hangar bay. It was mostly abandoned. 2 scout ships, some old supply pods, and a cargo loader drone pacing in circles. He activated his comm again. I've got a path to the roof hangar. Meet me at the lift shaft in 5. I'm bringing explosives, Ramos replied. Dane grinned. You always know how to cheer me up. As the crew regrouped at the shaft entrance, Tess started to come to. She looked around at the armor, the guns, the angry, blood-stained men, and her eyes filled with fear. "You're not military," she whispered. "No," Dane said. "We're worse." Ramos stepped close. "We need to blow the top. I've rigged the shaft wall with breachers." "How long?" 20 seconds. But once it pops, they'll throw everything they've got at this corridor." Dane looked down at Tess, then up at the shaft. "Then we go straight through them." The wall detonated in a flash of noise and smoke, revealing a sheer drop with a barely functioning lift track leading to the surface hangar. No elevator, just 200 meters of climb. "Argus," Dane shouted. "We need a pickup. Anything with a winch, wings, or a miracle." The AI's voice came through, strained. "I'm sending a drone carrier. ETA 90 seconds. Be on the roof or be dead." Dane looked at Ramos. "We climb." The ascent was brutal. With one arm around Tess and the other gripping the crumbling lift rails, Dane powered upward using his suit's exomotors. But even they groaned under the weight. Behind him, Ramos and two others covered their flank, shooting down at pursuing Spec Ops troops swarming up the shaft with grapples and thrusters. "I'm out!" one soldier shouted. "Then throw rocks!" Ramos snapped, firing another shot that clipped a Yularan's mask and sent him spiraling into the abyss. Dane's grip began to falter. His fingers bled inside his gloves. Tess coughed, eyes fluttering. "You should leave me," she gasped. "You've got no idea who I am," Dane growled. He reached the rooftop first and slammed a deployable barricade into the doorway, creating a choke point. The others followed seconds later, panting and bleeding. A sound split the sky, the unmistakable roar of a vengeance drone carrier, its engine screaming as it dropped from orbit and hovered just above the rooftop, ramp open. "Get her aboard," Dane barked. Ramos lifted Tess gently and sprinted toward the ramp. Dane turned to fire one last salvo into the stairwell, forcing the Yularans to scatter. Then he ran. As the ramp closed behind them, a plasma bolt grazed his leg. But he didn't flinch. The drone ship pulled up hard, breaking into the upper atmosphere, and dove back toward vengeance. "Hare, you're off active duty for 48 hours. Van, you're on internal rotation. You want peace? Go clean the air scrubbers. Maybe it'll remind you what Earth's air used to smell like." That night, the tension spread. In the mess hall, men stared at each other longer. Conversations were short, muted. The adrenaline high was gone, and now the questions were coming, the kind they didn't want to ask but couldn't ignore. How far would they go? When would it end? And what would be left of them when it did? Dane sat alone at the viewport lounge, whiskey in hand, watching the stars slide past. They didn't twinkle here. They just blinked. Cold. Uncaring. Argus broke the silence. "Captain, we've received a priority signal." "From where?" "A Yularan transmission hub. Encrypted. But the frequency matches diplomatic clearances." "Open it." The voice that came through was familiar. "Captain Strathmore, I am General Val Terran. We spoke once, briefly before your Virex operation." Dane didn't respond. "I represent a faction within the Empire that recognizes the severity of your demands and the legitimacy of your pain." Still, Dane said nothing. "I am prepared to offer something unprecedented, immunity. A formal public declaration of war crimes committed by the Empire. Trials, extraditions, reparations. But only if you stop now, before more blood is spilled." Dane leaned forward. "And what if I don't?" Valtaran paused. "Then I fear what's left of your people will die a second death. This time, for good." The screen cut to static. The next morning, Ramos entered Dane's quarters unannounced. "You heard the offer?" Dane nodded. "And?" Dane took a deep breath. He's scared. Of you? Number of the truth getting out. If the rest of the galaxy sees what the Empire really is, if the broadcast keeps spreading, they lose control. Ramos sat across from him. We could force real change. That's not my goal. It should be. Dane looked at him hard. What do you want, Ramos? A flag? A treaty? A seat at their table? I want to stop waking up every night hearing screams from orbit, Ramos snapped. I want to stop living inside a ship that runs on grief. They stared at each other. Then Dane nodded slowly. Then take the next mission off. Ramos hesitated. No. Dane raised an eyebrow. You're still with me? Ramos's jaw tightened. I just don't want to forget why we started. That's all. The next target was a moon facility orbiting Garthus Prime, one of the Empire's black sites. Argus pulled up records as the ship entered warp. This facility processed captured human subjects from colony sectors 14 through 19. Initial estimates suggest over 300,000 dead. Any survivors? Dane asked. One. Dane's head snapped toward the screen. Who? Argus displayed a blurry image. A woman, long dark hair, emaciated ragged clothes, in a cell. Subject ID, designation unknown, but DNA sequencing matches Earth colony origin, Sol 3 diaspora. Dane stared. Alive? Vital signs low, sedated, but yes. Mission parameters just changed, he said. We go in loud, but we bring her out alive. The Vengeance struck fast. No warnings, no diplomacy. The orbital station's shields were up within seconds, but it didn't matter. The ship tore through them like paper. Dane led the boarding team himself this time, moving with fury and purpose. The corridors were tight, poorly defended. The guards fell quickly. They found her in the lower cell blocks. Dane paused when he saw her, chained, half-conscious, a feeding tube dripping slow fluid into her arm. He knelt beside her. Hey, he whispered, can you hear me? Her eyes flickered, and she spoke one word, cracked, nearly broken. Earth? Dane felt something twist in his chest. Not pain, not rage, something older, something forgotten. Hope. We're taking you home, he said. But as he reached to unbind her, her eyes widened. No, she gasped. Trap. What? Then the walls exploded. The blast was deafening. A wall of white fire swallowed the far end of the corridor, flinging steel and body parts in every direction. Dane was thrown off his feet, slammed against the opposite wall so hard his HUD cracked. Alarms blared inside his helmet. Blood trickled from his ear. But he didn't black out. He didn't even hesitate. As he dragged himself up, he shouted into the comm. Status Ramos, Van, report. No answer. The debris cloud settled slowly, and through the smoke, Dane could see movement. Figures in sleek armor, silhouettes with glowing visors and plasma rifles aimed straight at him. Yularan spec ops. Not the usual security trash. This was elite. The Empire had sprung its trap. Argus, Dane barked. What the hell is this? Ambush protocol detected. Jamming fields in place. Multiple power signatures converging. Captain, I strongly recommend withdrawal. Not without the prisoner. She is no longer a priority asset. Everyone was silent inside. Tess looked at Dane again. You're going to kill more of them, aren't you? Yes. Even if they surrender? Dane looked away. There's no surrender when the war started with genocide. Back aboard the Vengeance, the crew was rattled. 2 men were dead, another in critical condition. The survivor, Tess, had been stabilized and placed in a recovery pod. And Dane was alone again, standing at the front viewport, the Empire's stars stretching out like a graveyard. Argus broke the silence. Your operation was partially successful, but the ambush indicates intelligence leaks. Someone fed them our location. Dane frowned. From the crew. Unknown. I'm investigating. Keep it silent. Yes, Commander. Ramos joined him minutes later. We got played, he said. Dane nodded. They let us broadcast the Virex confessions so we'd feel invincible. Then they waited for a strike that mattered to us. And they almost killed us. But they didn't. Ramos paused. You think the survivor's telling the truth? I saw it in her eyes. She didn't know what this place was until it was too late. We've all been there. Dane glanced down at the floor. She said something else. What? She said they're planning something worse. Ramos tensed. Worse than genocide? She didn't say how, just that it's already in motion. A contingency plan. Ramos turned to the viewport. You think it's real? Dane's voice dropped. I think we're just getting started. The infirmary was dim and silent, except for the steady pulse of the medical monitors. Tess lay in the recovery pod, half awake, her face drawn and pale. A fresh scar marked her collarbone, sealed by dermal mesh. Her fingers twitched now and then, fragments of bad dreams flickering beneath closed lids. Captain Dane Strathmore stood nearby, arms crossed, helmet under his arm. He wasn't watching her like a commander checking on a survivor. He was watching her like a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. I've reviewed every minute of that ambush, he said quietly. Every hallway, every camera feed, every minute of audio. You weren't just in that cell. Tess opened her eyes slowly. No. You were staged. She nodded softly. Yes. Dane didn't move. His voice didn't rise, but the weight of it sank deeper than shouting ever could. Why? Tess's voice was barely above a whisper. Because they knew you'd come. Because someone gave them your pattern, your behavior. They knew what you were looking for, and they knew you couldn't resist a survivor. He stared at her. You were bait. I volunteered. That stopped him cold. You what? I wasn't captured, she said. I surrendered. I told them I could get you there. I told them you'd come for me. Because you needed to believe someone was left. He took a slow step forward. You sold me out? No, she said quickly, pain flashing in her face. I lied to them. I gave them coordinates, but not yours. I told them you had a fleet, a resistance. I fed them a ghost. You let them set the trap. I didn't think you'd walk into it blind. Dane clenched his fists. Then you don't know me at all. An hour later, Ramos paced outside the infirmary, waiting. He saw Dane walk out, jaw set, eyes darker than usual. She's compromised? Ramos asked. Worse, Dane muttered. She's complicated. Should I lock her down? Number she saved my life, but she also used me to burn hers. Ramos folded his arms. Then she's dangerous. So are we, Dane snapped. They stood in silence. Then Argus chimed in. Commander, I've located the source of the leak. Both men turned. What do you mean? Dane asked. A crew member accessed a secure command file 4 days ago and transmitted portions of it via an encrypted ping embedded in an outgoing maintenance log. Who? Argus hesitated. Lieutenant Van. Dane's face didn't move. Ramos's did. No, he said flatly. Not Van. He's loud, annoying, but he's not a traitor. He was the one asking for peace, Dane said coldly. Maybe he decided we were going too far. No, Ramos repeated. He lost his brother in the riots. I saw the body with him. He's one of us. Argus, Dane said. Where is he now? Maintenance bay. Alone. The metal clanged under Dane's boots as he walked down the corridor, flanked by 2 guards. Ramos followed close behind, still not believing it, still hoping there was another explanation. Van was hunched over a control panel when they arrived, wiping grease from his hands. He looked up, confused. Something wrong? Dane didn't speak, just stared. Then, you sent out a log file. Van blinked. What? 4 days ago, you accessed my movement data, transmitted it off-ship. What are you talking about? Van said, slowly standing. Dane's voice dropped. You handed them our strike timing. No, I didn't. Ramos stepped forward. Tell me it's a mistake, man. Please. I don't even know how to send a log off-ship, Van said, his voice rising. Why the hell would I? Then his expression changed. His face fell. Oh, God. What? Dane demanded. I gave my login to Engineering Chief Reelan that day. He said he needed a diagnostic report signed under command authority for the port stabilizer. I didn't even think about it. Reelan? Ramos echoed. He's been with us since the original refit. Dane didn't hesitate. Argus, lock down the engineering deck. Contain Reelan. Too late, Argus replied. He just activated a delayed systems override. He's trying to disable internal sensors and open the ship's forward hull doors. Dane's blood turned cold. He's going to blow the ship open. Chaos erupted. The Vengeance's internal alarm screamed to life, red lights flashing across the halls. Doors slammed shut. Emergency bulkheads hissed into place, but the sabotage was already in motion. In the engineering core, Reelan worked fast. His hands flew across a touchscreen, bypassing fail-safes, opening vent protocols, and rewiring access to the ship's internal fusion core regulator. He wasn't Yularan. He was human, but not loyal. When the doors burst open, Dane entered first, rifle raised, eyes locked, fire in his chest. Step away from the console, he barked. Reelan turned slowly, eyes calm, expression blank. You're too late. Ramos stepped in behind him. Why? Because this crusade ends now, Reelan said, his voice flat. You've proven the point. The Empire's afraid. Good. But if we keep pushing, we become them. We already are, Dane growled. Number, we're worse. They did what empires do, but we're doing this out of personal grief. We're pretending it's justice, but it's just rage. You're dragging ghosts through the galaxy. Dane advanced, finger on the trigger. You gave up your own people. No, Reelan said softly. I gave them a reason to stop. With one last press, he activated the override. The ship trembled. Dane fired. Reelan dropped. Ramos rushed to the panel. Systems locked. We've got 40 seconds before the forward hull opens. We'll lose the armory, the launch bays. And the crew, Dane said, already moving. Argus, emergency vent override. I want full power rerouted to containment seals. Working. 30 seconds. You kill him? Ramos asked, glancing back. Dane stared at Reelan's motionless body. Yeah. The override was disabled with 12 seconds to spare, but not before pressure blew out several minor compartments, tearing holes into the ship's lower decks. 3 men were dead, 5 injured. The medics worked fast, but the air was filled with tension no one could soothe. Later that night, Dane sat in the observation deck again, blood on his sleeves, staring at a piece of shattered console glass in his hands. He didn't speak for a long time. Ramos eventually joined him, saying nothing. Then Dane finally asked, what if he was right? Ramos didn't answer. I kill, Dane said. That's all I've done since they took Earth. I don't negotiate. I don't forgive. I erase. That's what they did to us. I know. So keep going. Dane turned to him. Even if it makes us something else? Ramos clenched his jaw. Every civilization is built on the bones of the last one. If we burn them down, maybe something better rises from the ash. Dane looked back out at the stars. Or maybe, he thought, we're the ash. 3 days passed. No ships pursued them. No Yularan broadcasts blared across the galaxy. The usual static of war went quiet, and that silence, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like a trap waiting to close. Captain Dane Strathmore stood alone on the command deck of Vengeance, hands resting against the cold metal console. Outside the viewport, the stars had stopped moving. The ship drifted near the edge of a dying nebula, cloaked and powered low to stay hidden. The hull still bore the scorch marks of the last ambush. The air inside the vessel had grown heavier, tighter. Every man on board could feel it. This wasn't over. "Argus," Dane said, voice barely above a whisper. "Give me an update." The AI responded without delay. Ularan fleet movements have decreased by 47% since the Virex broadcast. Their patrol routes are now defensive, not offensive. They're digging in. Like they're afraid. Like they're planning. Dane nodded slowly. "Any chatter?" "One major signal, intercepted 2 hours ago. It wasn't encrypted. They wanted us to hear it." Dane turned. "Play it." The voice that filled the room was slow, refined, and unfamiliar. "I address the vessel known as Vengeance and its commanding officer, Captain Dane Strathmore. I am Supreme Architect Nel Varun of the Ularan Council Ascendant. I offer parley, not from fear, but from understanding. You have made your point, human. The galaxy sees you now. So let us speak, and end this before it becomes something worse." The message ended. Dane didn't move. For a long time, he just stared out into space. Ramos walked in behind him. "They're trying to negotiate." "They never negotiate," Dane said. "They do now." Dane scoffed. "This is a power play. They couldn't kill us, so now they're baiting the diplomat in me." Ramos didn't disagree. "Still, maybe this is the shift. The moment we force them into the corner. You said it yourself. If they flinch, we win." Dane stayed quiet. Then, after a moment, "Bring Tess to the strategy room." Tess looked better now. Clean clothes, color in her face, movement in her steps. But her eyes, they still carried something broken. She stood across from Dane, arms folded. "I've heard the broadcast." Dane raised a brow. "And?" "Nel Varun doesn't speak unless he's certain he can win something." Dane leaned forward. "So tell me, what does he want?" Tess didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "He wants to put a leash on you. Won't fit. He'll offer you validation," she said. "Make you feel powerful, respected. But behind that, he'll be calculating how many humans are still alive, how many you've united, and how long it'll take before you destroy yourselves." "Maybe we already have," Dane muttered. Tess took a deep breath. "If you meet him, he'll come in peace. He'll say all the right things, and then he'll ask for one." Dane frowned. "Ask for what?" "Her," Tess said. "He'll ask for me." That caught Ramos off guard. "Why you?" Tess didn't look away. "Because I was supposed to be the leverage, a human survivor, trained under Ularan protocols, a project they buried after the Purge, one meant to reintroduce salvageable specimens into civilized society." Dane's eyes narrowed. "They tried to domesticate us. They tried to own us. And you played along?" Tess's voice was steady. "I survived." That shut the room up. Dane nodded. "Prep the meeting. But we set the terms." They chose a neutral zone, a derelict mining station in a decaying orbit above a brown dwarf star. A hollow shell, once used by fringe colonies for resource extraction before the Ularans seized it and wiped the workers out. A fitting place for liars to gather. Dane didn't come with an army, just Ramos, Tess, and 2 armed guards. No symbols, no flags, no peace banners, just steel eyes and silence. When the transport docked, the Ularans arrived precisely on time. They walked in with long robes, clean skin, perfect posture, like they hadn't been at war, like none of this had happened. And in front of them was Nel Varun. He looked older than Dane expected, pale, tall, draped in ceremonial black. His voice, when he spoke, echoed like an actor reciting lines. Captain Strathmore, a name now spoken across 1,000 stars. Dane stared back. Good. Varun offered a slight nod. We meet not as conquerors or conquered, but as survivors. Both our civilizations are bleeding. I'd prefer not to see them die. Dane didn't move. You didn't come here for balance. You came here because you're afraid. Perhaps, Varun allowed. You've reminded us that humanity was not destroyed, merely buried alive, and now the bones have risen, but bones don't rebuild empires. You're not here to rebuild mine. No, Varun said gently. I'm here to stop you from burning ours. Dane stepped forward. Then talk. Varun's eyes flicked to Tess, and everything changed. I see she survived, he said. Dane cut in, voice like a blade. She's not part of this. Oh, but she is, Varun said softly. She is mine. The room went silent. Then Ramos stepped forward. You want to repeat that? Varun raised a hand. Not as property, not as prisoner, but as proof. That coexistence is possible. Dane barked a bitter laugh. You think dragging a girl into a re-education facility and brainwashing her into a cultural mascot is coexistence? Varun didn't flinch. She was raised with our values. She knows our truth. Her mind is valuable. She's not a token, Dane said coldly. She's the future, Varun replied, and I will not let her rot in your warship, poisoned by hate. Tess stepped forward now. Nell, she said, you buried Earth. You sterilized culture, you outlawed memory, and you called it mercy. I've lived among you for years, and the only thing you fear is truth. Varun sighed. So be it. He turned back to Dane. I offered you peace. I offered you understanding. What you want, Captain, is vengeance. But vengeance is not a foundation. Dane stared into his eyes. You're wrong. And why is that? Because vengeance builds loyalty, and loyalty builds an army. Varun's mouth twitched. Then the next move is yours. No, Dane said. The next move is yours, and I hope you make it loud. They returned to vengeance without firing a shot. But the fire had already started. Tess sat alone in the galley, trembling. Ramos stood guard nearby. He'll come back for you. I know. You ready? She looked at him. Number. But I've been ready longer than I want to admit. Meanwhile, Dane walked into the ship's vault, a sealed chamber deep in the belly of the vessel. Inside were crates, black ones, no markings. Each one contained fragments of Earth's final resistance. Not weapons, something worse. Memories, hard drives, images, videos, broadcasts, testimonies, and one more item. A black cylinder, sealed and marked Exodus. He held it in his hand, staring down at the words. Argus's voice echoed through the chamber. You're thinking of deploying it. Yes. There's no coming back from that. Dane ran a hand across the cold surface. They'll never learn, he said. Then teach them. The Vengeance stood in the shadow of a dead moon, its black hull almost invisible against the cold void. No lights, no movement, just silence before the storm. Inside the warship, Captain Dane Strathmore sat alone in the armory's core chamber, the Exodus device resting on the table before him. It was small, cylindrical, matte black, no more than 2 feet long, but it pulsed faintly, as if alive. Inside, sealed behind layers of code and firewalls, was a virus unlike anything in the known galaxy, a weapon crafted not to destroy ships or cities, but truth. Tess entered quietly. You're really going to use it? Dane didn't look up. That depends. On what? On whether they make the mistake I want them to. She walked closer, slow, cautious. You know what that virus does. I do. Then say it. Dane's voice was low. It erases the myth of the Yularan Empire, all of it, their language archives, cultural records, history logs, galactic treaties, article legacy, burned from every system, every connected terminal, every node. He finally looked at her. They made Earth a whisper. I'm about to turn them into an echo. Argus activated an alert. Yularan fleet en route, 106 warships, multiple dreadnoughts. Estimated time to contact, 16 minutes. Dane stood. Ramos entered the bridge seconds later, already armoring up. They're not even cloaking. Full burn, direct path. They want to make an example, Dane said. We're outgunned, outnumbered, surrounded. Perfect, Dane muttered. Get everyone to battle stations, but don't return fire until I say. Ramos blinked. You planning to talk again? I'm planning to show them something. 15 minutes later, the Yularan fleet dropped out of warp, a shimmering wall of silver and blue, their ships sleek and majestic. Dozens of them. Perfect formation, laser-linked, intimidation in motion. The lead ship opened comms. Nelvaroon's face appeared on the main screen. I warned you, he said calmly. You did. I gave you a choice. You gave me a leash, Dane said. I don't wear those anymore. Varun's eyes narrowed. You are a terrorist, Strathmore. Nothing more. No, Dane replied. I'm a historian with a hammer. He held up the Exodus device. Varun's face paled. You don't know what that is, he said quickly. I do. You'll erase everything. I know. Varun's tone cracked. You'll destroy thousands of years of structure? Good, Dane snapped. Structure built on genocide, on lies, on ash and bones. You made Earth a footnote. I'm about to turn your empire into a blank page. You release that, Varun hissed, and we will end you. There will be no future, no second wave, no legacy. Dane leaned in close to the screen. You already ended me. I'm just what's left. Then he cut the transmission. Argus, Dane said. Deploy Exodus. Final confirmation required. Dane placed his hand on the device. Confirm. Let it burn. The virus launched. A silent pulse radiated from Vengeance's comms array. Not a weapon blast, not an explosion, but a signal. Invisible. Viral. It shot into every frequency the Yularan systems touched. Their fleet lights flickered. Their screens turned black, then scrambled. Across every ship, officers panicked. Command stopped working. Archives blinked out. Tactical software defaulted to error messages. Artificial intelligences looped. Holomaps collapsed. Entire databases collapsed in real time. Varun's dreadnought went dark. He stood on the bridge, watching his empire fall apart, one corrupted link at a time. No, he whispered. On Vengeance, Dane stood silently, watching the ripple through the stars. Argus spoke softly. Yularan ships are losing internal system control. Memory core annihilation complete. 93% cultural data loss projected within 72 hours. Ramos turned. You actually did it. They erased our people, Dane said. Now they know how it feels. Tess stared at the screen, speechless. Ships in the enemy fleet began scattering. Some retreated, some collided, blinded by systems failure. One cruiser accidentally fired on its own ally before crashing into the debris field. But one ship didn't run. Varun's dreadnought remained, drifting, damaged, but turning toward Vengeance. He wasn't leaving. He was coming to die. The Yularan dreadnought powered forward, guns priming, manual override engaged. He's going to ram us, Ramos growled. Dane stepped forward. Then we answer. Return fire, Ramos asked. No. He turned to Tess. Broadcast. What? Open the channel. Tess hesitated, then pressed the comms panel. The screen flickered, and Varun's face returned, lit by flickering emergency lights. Dane stared into his eyes. Now you see what it's like, he said. To lose everything in the dark. to scream and realize no one's listening. Varun didn't speak. You killed Earth with silence. I answered you with memory. Still, the Yularan leader said nothing, but his expression changed. Not rage, not pride. Shame. He lowered his eyes. His ship powered down. A moment passed, and then it veered off course, drifting, helpless. Dane cut the channel. Argus, stand down weapons. The war was over. Not with an explosion, with silence. The galaxy watched, stunned, as the Yularan Empire collapsed overnight, not in blood, but in forgetting. Their libraries, their songs, their histories, gone. 1,000 years of dominance reduced to blank terminals and panicked leaders screaming into broken systems. Word spread. Other species took notice. The few remaining humans scattered across the stars, hiding in colonies, enslaved in backwaters, living like ghosts. They rose, slowly, cautiously, and when they whispered, they didn't whisper of war. They whispered of Strathmore. Days passed, then a week, then 2. And vengeance floated once more in the void, battle-scarred and silent. Tess sat in the medical bay, helping stabilize the wounded. Ramos stood near the hangar, overseeing repairs. The crew didn't celebrate. There was nothing to toast, because victory hadn't made them whole, just heard. Dane stood alone again in the observation deck, watching a new star rise in a system no one had named. Argus broke the silence. Commander, multiple human signals have begun broadcasting across sectors 9, 12, and 17. Earthnet fragments, resistance groups. They are organizing. They finally believe we're real, Dane muttered. They believe you're real. Dane smiled faintly. I'm not real, he said. I'm just what's left when humanity forgets how to kneel. Argus was quiet for a moment. Then, what now? Dane looked out the window. They'll come for us eventually. Not the Yularans, the others. The ones who were too afraid to fight. They'll want control. Will you give it to them? Dane's voice was steel. I didn't do this for politics. I did it so no one would forget what was stolen. Let the diplomats come. Let the scavengers crawl out of the cracks. They'll wave flags. They'll hold ceremonies. He turned away from the glass, walking slowly down the corridor. But when they do, they'll walk on burned ground, and I'll be there, a reminder. Of what? That no empire survives erasing a human.